Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and the co-host of the podcast Fear and Greed Business News. As always, I'm with Canna Campbell, financial planner, founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform covering YouTube and podcast, books, Instagram, threads, TikTok, keynote speeches and more. Hello, Canna.
Good morning. I'm quite excited because I love talking about money, but today we're talking about spending money and the emotions behind it. So I feel like today's episode is going to resonate with a lot of people, but also make people feel safe.
You make it sound very woo-woo right from the start. It's all about emotions. It's all about feelings.
Well, money is emotional, so why not?
Okay. Well, today's topic, actually, you are right, because today's topic is all about spending. And more specifically, it is about overspending. People who can't quite stop themselves from spending. We're going to look at kind of why it happens, what it looks like, and most importantly, how to gain some control again over your money. And a lot of this is emotional, isn't it? Like it has a root cause that is often quite an emotional one.
And everyone has something, I think.
Are there varying degrees of overspending? Because I imagine there's people who kind of can't resist like buying a Milky Way as they're doing the grocery shopping. And then there's probably those who have got multiple credit cards all maxed out and no way of paying them off. And they are kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes, of course there are. And I think it's really important that we go back to the basics and actually define this properly up front so we don't get people paranoid and misdiagnosing themselves. So if someone is an overspender, it means they're spending more than what they actually have or what they earn. And I have to say this, overspending does not discriminate. So this can be for all sexes, all different financial situations, all different levels of education as well. So, thinking that it's only women and it's only young women, it is completely incorrect. And essentially it is a squanderless lifestyle.
What's the worst you've ever seen? I'm assuming that you would have seen this throughout your career. You would have kind of maybe seen this. Might not have been a client. Might have just been someone that you have known. Something. Have you seen this?
Here's the funny thing. I'm a financial planner, so as soon as someone hears that, everything's hidden because I think people assume I'm going to judge them, which is not the case at all.
No, you save your judgment here for the studio for me.
Exactly. So I feel like people try to hide things from me if they are an overspender. So I haven't personally seen too much directly. However, of course, people will come to me and share stories or concerns about their loved ones spending in a certain way. So in the first person, no, I have not seen, but have I heard in the second person, third person, I guess it is? Yes, I have. So at the end of the day, I don't judge. And everyone, as I say, everyone has their thing, whether it be sugar, whether it be screens, whether it be alcohol, everyone, it's just another challenge that people have and that they grab onto. But I think it's important that we understand the signs of overspending, to help someone realize, okay, well, actually, I might be an overspender and may need to get help. And the classic things I would say is, as you mentioned, the credit card debts. So credit card debt or multiple credit card debts or different loans to different institutions and, not having a budget at all, having no savings at all, definitely not having any emergency money. And, obviously the consequence of that is then obviously having a low credit score. And, not really having any goals to work on. Ideally, financial goals seem to be lacking. But the number one physical sign is, I would say, being surrounded by stuff. Yeah. Stuff that person has purchased or you've purchased. You can see the clutter, the shopping bags, the, items hanging up with tags still, the boxes of, all the electronic gadgets and things stashed at the back of the closet. That's the signs that, that I'm talking about that, okay, all right, there is potentially something to explore and do some work on.
Are there particular triggers for this? Like, is there an element of, and look, our podcast is called How Do They Afford That, which is kind of like it's quite voyeuristic, isn't it?
It
It is
is.
about kind of looking at what other people have and wondering how they do it. Is there an element of trying to keep up with other people, perhaps, that's in overspending, or is there a whole range of different things?
There is a whole range, but obviously at the end of the day, like when we purchase something, we do get a dopamine hit. And there's peer pressure. There is the lifestyle creep. There is, obviously at the end of the day, the impulsive buying. I was talking to someone who works for one of those online shopping networks, and she said that there are customers that just continuously buy nonstop every single day. And then there's obviously social media. And, I also think debt is a trigger or a catalyst for overspending, because when someone is in debt, and say they're in debt by, say, $15,000, and they see, say, a new pair of sneakers. Well, I'm already in debt. What's another $250 more worth of debt? And that's why I sort of say it becomes quite toxic and it can spiral even further out of control. So, yeah, I'd say there's a variety of different sort of situations where you'll see these sort of triggers, you could call it.
And I imagine there would be the psychological. So, and we're not qualified to talk about these kinds of things, but there would be things like stress, and that would also be something that would probably encourage it.
One of the situations where someone told me of their loved one overspending, and it was actually boredom.
Really?
Yeah.
And just nothing to do, so just spent
bored.
money. God, it must be an awful feeling then to kind of just know that you are not getting anywhere financially because you just cannot resist this urge to spend.
Yeah.
And to see those credit card bills coming in, and to see the loan statements coming through and not be making any headway. And I suppose there would be an element of putting your head in the sand. Definitely.
And then that triggers anxiety and stress and, sleepless nights. And that's why I said it can just spiral. But, this is another form of addiction, and it needs to be taken very, very seriously, just like alcohol or drug abuse or gambling.
Yeah, and so the long-term consequences, you mentioned before, credit scores, did you mention that? Or
Yes, I did.
Did I just imagine that?
No, I said lower credit score. Wow, you were listening.
I was listening, but clearly kind of not processing, because I wasn't 100% sure if you had said it. No. So long-term consequences, if you have got kind of multiple credit cards and if you've got multiple kind of personal loans that you are using to fund your spending, that is going to have an impact on your credit score.
Absolutely. That may impact you further down the track one day when you want to go and buy a property and the bank say, well, sorry, you don't qualify. You have to wait a couple of years until you fix your credit score, or you have to borrow at a much higher interest rate.
And the banks, when you are applying for a loan, a home loan as well, look quite closely at your spending.
Very closely. And as we know from having Adam on the show, they want to see a budget. They want to see your transactions. Where do you spend your money?
And it's going to be very hard to hide this.
Yeah.
This level of overspending from, and this isn't even then talking about your credit score. This is just about those questions that the bank is going to ask you, whether or not they're deciding to give you a loan.
Exactly. And also there's the financial consequence, but also then there's your mental health and your physical health. And, it's not just borrowing money. If you have been an overspender, it quite often aligns with someone who ends up with no money in investments or barely any, not much money put aside into superannuation, not much in emergency money, and just living this life filled with worry about the future.
Well, I think we've succeeded in making everything sound thoroughly depressing. It feels as though we've gone through all of the downsides here.
Oh, God, you're so negative. No, this is an opportunity to grow, to heal, to rise above.
This is my point. I'm saying we've got all the bad stuff out of the way early. We are going to take a little break, just a very quick break, and then we are going to come back and we are going to say, what do you do about it?
All right, great. I like these productive conversations.
You went off way too early then in assuming that I was being a negative Nelly.
All right. I'll wear that.
Okay, excellent. Quick break and then we fix the problem. Kanna, we are talking today all about overspending, and we've talked about what it looks like, the warning signs, the triggers, the long-term consequences of a chronic overspending problem. Let's now look at how to deal with it, because there's no point going through the problem if we don't try and come up with some kind of a solution. I have read, and I don't know whether this is necessarily the case, I've read that tracking your expenses and your spending is a good step because it kind of just increases your own visibility and your own understanding of what you are spending and where you're spending it.
You're forced to look at the cold, hard truth. So I would recommend, and I'm actually someone who doesn't recommend tracking your spending when it comes to budgeting, because I think it does take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
But in this one situation where you have someone that's drowning in debt and overspending, yes, 100%. And this isn't just once a week. This is every day. You should be going through your transactions, looking at where you are spending money and how much is. And it is quite a sobering activity because you realize how quickly those little expenses, the coffee here, the T-shirt that you bought here, a new dress there, really does add up by the end of the week or the end of the month or the pay cycle. And that's that moment where the penny drops that you need to go, okay, all right, this is actually a waste of money. I need to do something about it. So I definitely recommend in that situation, tracking your spending and also switching off the cards, no credit cards, use a debit card, or even better, switch to cash if that is convenient for you. Because seeing that exchange of, a $100 note or a $50 note will make you so much more aware as to the exchange of values, but also what you value. And it actually hurts to hand money over.
That kind of tracking of spending, that could be the first time that somebody actually realizes, isn't it? Just how much they are overspending. And it could actually be really quite a confronting moment, couldn't it?
It is. But better to discover that earlier rather than later, and where there's more debt or more valuable time lost and opportunities lost.
Okay, so we are tracking expenses and spending. We are moving away from credit cards,
Definitely
looking at
shut
cash.
them down.
And I'll come back to credit cards in a second. We are switching either to a debit card or to cash. What about then setting financial goals? Does this help to change the mindset?
Definitely. And, whilst you get a dopamine hit from buying something, you also get a dopamine hit, and I think a bigger dopamine hit from achieving a goal.
Yep.
So in these situations, if we're dealing with someone who's an overspender, they're getting lots of dopamine hits all the time with every single expense.
Yep.
So we need to almost recreate that environment for them and have lots of short, small, little financial goals to work towards, even if it's only saving up $100, even if it's only, paying $50 off your debt. Lots of those little things so you can actually feel good about yourself and you're still getting that sort of high, if you want to call it. And it also helps rebuild your sense of faith and confidence again and makes you feel like, okay, all right, things are different. I'm kind of getting back on track. And that's a really attractive feeling to have if you are trying to rebuild or turn your life around.
Yeah, and it gives you something really positive to focus on, doesn't it? Like it is, we talked about all the negativity around this, and this is something really, really positive, a longer term kind of dopamine kind of hit. Credit cards, just to close off credit cards entirely.
And buy now, pay later.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, including that in this. How should somebody with a spending problem approach credit cards and approach buy now, pay later? Is it just a no-go area?
A no-go.
Entirely
No-go.
just cut it out.
Cut it out. This is the problem. You've got to go to the remove temptation.
Okay.
I have no issues with buy now, pay later, and I have no issues with credit card when used in the right way, for the right reasons. But this is causing or it's enabling that person to continuously overspend is got to be removed. So removing those temptations, absolutely, that is essential.
Okay, all right. And that would be hard, wouldn't it? Especially when every shop has kind of get your buy now, pay later here and use this. And it does seem very easy to get a credit card as well. There is an element of very strong self-discipline required.
But come back to the goals. Remember, we're replacing, that hit with something that's bigger, better and healthier.
Yeah, no, I like that. What about financial accountability? And I was reading about, like, say, in Alcoholics Anonymous and those kinds of organisations where you actually have somebody that you are accountable to, a spouse or a friend or someone. Does that have value in this situation where they can essentially be the person that is helping to hold you to account as you are trying to give up what is essentially an addiction?
Absolutely. And this is where I think seeing a financial counselor could be really valuable, because you want someone that actually is going to go the distance with you. Yes, a friend may, keep you in check for 3 months, but what if you've got 3 years worth of debt repayments to make? And, and there's a lot of, you want to reduce or remove the risk of a relapse in overspending. So I would probably suggest, if you're serious about this and it's a big problem, go to a financial counselor that can work with you on a long-term basis and be there once a week, once a month to help you keep going. Whereas a friend may not necessarily be as reliable and also may not necessarily have the right skill set as well, because, you're putting a lot of faith in that person. But, the sooner you get onto this, the better. And with any of the programs, like the 12-step program, is the first thing is admitting to yourself, this is not healthy. I don't feel good about myself. I'm not proud. Something needs to be done. That awareness is the start of your journey. And then obviously doing that work on yourself. There are going to be uncomfortable moments. There are going to be feelings that you don't want to deal with. But you have to if you want to make a long-lasting change. And really that mindfulness and that, going to the root of the problem, it's that deep work, it's that dark work, but it's where the best type of rebirth can come from. And yes, I know I'm going off like kumbaya with you, but I do think you can heal from this and you can learn how to spend money in a safe way and in a way that's guilt-free, but you have to do the work and you've got to pave a better way, a healthier way, a happier way for yourself. And if it means having support, take it and have proactive measures in place. And you never know, one day you actually might be able to help someone else who's gone down the path you've gone down.
Is there a chance of going too far, of kind of going back too far the other way, and all of a sudden that you have you've replaced one unhealthy relationship with money with another unhealthy relationship with money, where you're no longer kind of willing to spend anything on anything at all? Is that, I suppose, where the having good financial goals then comes in, and it's about changing your overall relationship with money?
Yeah, that actually happens quite a bit. People, become almost frugal and they cannot physically bring themselves to spending money. And again, that's where you've got to get some professional help so you can learn to forgive yourself. This is not about punishing yourself. And yes, of course, you want to try and undo the financial damage, but you're also trying to learn and grow and show some sort of kindness and compassion and self-love to yourself, because sometimes that's really when you get to the root of the problem, there is an element of self-love. You're looking to give yourself self-love through spending. So yes, it does happen, but with the right type of help, you won't get to that point where you go to the other end of the spectrum, or you don't switch your overspending to another form of addiction.
All right. I feel like we've covered this in some detail. So the signs, the warning signs, the things to look out for are those loans stacking up and the credit cards that are maxed out and no real means to kind of pay them off because you just keep on adding to them, and being surrounded by stuff that you have bought because you just couldn't resist, essentially. And that there is a range of these triggers, whether it's kind of peer pressure or lifestyle creep or social media, or debt just kind of spiraling and snowballing and debt attracting more debt as you go, or stress, a whole bunch of things contributing to it. And that is then one of those long-term impacts as well, that stress that is triggering overspending then causes more long-term stress, and it just keeps on going and builds up to more anxiety, and also has an impact on you financially. But as we discussed, there are some straightforward steps to kind of fixing it, that we are talking about things like tracking your expenses, tracking your spending, just so that you've got that awareness, that you have got that visibility and that understanding of what you're actually doing, setting some financial goals. So replacing that really short-term sugar hit that you get from spending with something long-term that is going to make you feel good about yourself and about your money. It is about switching off the credit cards, getting rid of that, getting rid of buy now, pay later, changing perhaps to either a debit card or to cash, so there is actually some meaning and some feeling behind the payment when you make it. Removing the temptation if you are someone who does have a tendency to overspend on credit cards, and then get help if you need it as well. And whether that could be someone, a friend or a spouse, someone who is able to help you along the way, but also acknowledging that in the end, that is not their job. They are not someone who does this professionally and does this every day, whereas a financial counselor is somebody who is able to do this and maybe the right person to help you every week from now until who knows how long it takes to kind of get past a challenge like this, because in the end, it is an addiction. I think, is that it in a nutshell?
I'm really proud of today's episode.
Yeah, I feel like it's actually, overspending is something that almost feels like it gets glorified a little bit. It's just like, oh, it's just a shopaholic kind of thing, which sounds all good, and kind of have the glamorous images of kind of walking in the door with all of the shopping bags and everything. But in the end, it is a financial problem. It is a problem that can cause you significant issues with your own health and stress. And there are some easy steps to take, or manageable steps to take, to get yourself out of that problem.
And to start the journey today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. If people want more information from you, Kenna, where do they find you?
At Sugar Mama TV on Instagram.
And you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And the very best thing you can do is to tell somebody else or send them this episode and spread the word about How Do They Afford That? Thank you for your company. Join us again next week.